Hello, everyone. The chat option is now open, so please tell us from which location you're joining us. We enjoy meeting new people and hearing from longtime friends. Welcome to the March 10th, 2022 American Ethical Union and Freethought Society Zoom featuring actor and social activist Chetan Ahimsa. My name is Margaret Downey. I'm the founder and president of the Freethought Society. I met Chetan's father, Amar, several years ago at a Roanoke, Virginia event, and I met his mother, Mangala, shortly thereafter, and we became fast friends. Amar and Mangala connected me to their famous son, and here we are today introducing him to all of you via Zoom. I'm sure he'll find many like-minded friends here today. So thanks for logging on early, everyone. As our pre-event entertainment, we will be presenting a collection of film trailers in which Chetan has appeared. We are screen sharing a photo collection. Oh, hold on a second. Okay, so we are sharing the screen so that you can easily identify Chetan and the montage of the films that we'll be showing. Jake Ritter from the American Ethical Union put the film trailer collection together, and you'll be seeing that in a minute. Thank you so much, Jake. We thought that showing a film trailer collection would be a great way for audience members to appreciate Chetan's multiple talents. Chetan will be talking about his social activism work and much, much more. But for now, we wanted everyone to know about his accomplishments in the film industry. Chetan is not only a fine actor, he dances, sings, and even does his own stunts. His handsome looks and charming personality have made him a romance idol and a superstar in India. We hope you enjoy this collection of film trailers.
ಸಂಬಳ ಎಷ್ಟು ತಗೊಂತೀವಿ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಏನ್ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ.
ನೀವೇನ್ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ?
BBC ರಿಪೋರ್ಟರ್.
ಲೈಟ್ ಆಗಿ ನಿನ್ನ ನೋಡ್ತಿದ್ದ ಲೇ ಮುದ್ರಕೊಳಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಎಲೆ ಮೇಲಿರೋ ಅಪ್ಪ ಅಲ್ಲ ಕಣಲೇ, ನುಗ್ಗಿ ಹುಡುಕಿ ಹೊಡಿತೀನಿ.
ಮದುವೆ ಆಗಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳಾಗಿ ನಾಮಕರಣಕ್ಕೂ ಕರೀಲ್ವಲ್ಲ.
ನನಗೆ ಮದುವೆನೇ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ ಕಣ್ರಿ. ಹೆಲ್ಮಿ ಅದಿತಿ
ಪ್ರೈವೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಮೀಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು, ಸಿಗ್ತೀಯಾ?
ಸುಮ್ನೆ ಹೀಗೆ ತಲೆ ಕೆಡಿಸೋ ಹಾಗೆ ನಗಬೇಡ ನೀನು ಹೋಗೆ.
ಯಾಕೆ ಸರ್ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ?
ಬ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಮೋಸ ಮಾಡಿ ಎಜುಕೇಶನ್ ಲೋನ್ ತಗೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ.
ಫ್ರಾಡ್ ಮಕ್ಕಳು.
ಫೇಕ್ ಸರ್ಟಿಫಿಕೇಟ್ ಬಳಸಿ ಕೆಲವು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳು ಸರ್ಕಾರಿ ಹಾಗೂ ಖಾಸಗಿ ಕಂಪನಿಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುತ್ತಿರುವುದು ಮಾಹಿತಿ ದೊರೆತಿದೆ.
ಕಾಮನ್ ಮ್ಯಾನ್ ತರ ಕೂತ್ಕೋಬೇಡ, ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳಿಗೆ ಸಾಥ್ ಕೊಡೋ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟರ್ ತರ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ. ಅವನಿಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋದು ಎವಿಡೆನ್ಸ್. ಅವನು ನಿನ್ನ ಹುಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದೇ ಬರ್ತಾನೆ.
ಅವ್ರು ಯಾರು, ಏನ್ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಯಾವುದು ನಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಎಲ್ಲಾದ್ರೂ ಇರ್ಲಿ, ಅವರೇ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಹುಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬರ್ತಾರೆ.
ನನ್ನ ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ ತುಂಬಾ ದೊಡ್ಡದು.
ಅವ್ನು ಇಡೀ ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ನೇ ಛಿದ್ರ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದು ಭಾಷೆ, ಜ್ಞಾನ ಅಲ್ಲ. ಆದರೆ ಕನ್ನಡ ಒಂದು ಇತಿಹಾಸ. ಕನ್ನಡನ ಪ್ರೀತಿಸಿ, ಗೌರವಿಸಿ.
ಪಿಸು ಮಾತಿಗೆ ಅಧರ ತುಸು ಪ್ರೀತಿಗೆ ನೋಡಿದರೆ ಮಿತಿ ಮೀರುತ್ತಿದೆ ಮನಮೋಹಕ ಮಿಡಿತ ಆಳದಲ್ಲಿ ಅತಿಯಾಗುತ್ತಿದೆ ಅಪರೂಪದ ಸೆಳೆತ ನಿನ್ನದೇ ಹೆಸರಿದೆ ಕನಸಿನ ಊರಿಗೆ ಕುಣಿಯತಾ ಬಂದೆನು ಭಿನ್ನವಾದ ನಿನ್ನ ಧಾಟಿಗೆ ಓ ಸೋತೆ ನಾನು ನಿನ್ನ ಪ್ರೀತಿಗೆ ಮಧುರ ಪಿಸು ಮಾತಿಗೆ ಅಧರ ತುಸು ಪ್ರೀತಿಗೆ ಇರುವಲ್ಲಿಯೇ ಇರಲಾರದೆ ಬರುವಲ್ಲಿಯೂ ಬರಲಾರದೆ ಸೋತೆ ನಾನು ನಿನ್ನ ಪ್ರೀತಿಗೆ ಹೋ ಚೂರಾದೆ ಒಂದೇ ಭೇಟಿಗೆ
ಈ ಸಿನಿಮಾ ಕಾಲ್ಪನಿಕ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿಯಲ್ಲ.
ನಾನ್ ಜೈಲಲ್ಲಿದ್ದಾಗ ಬೇರೆ ಈಗ ಬೇರೆ. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ನಮ್ದು. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆಯೋ ದಂಡ ದುಡ್ಡು ಎಲ್ಲ ನನ್ನ ಕೈಗೆ ಬರ್ಬೇಕು. ಹಂಗಂತ ಕುಮಾರಿಂಗ್ ಹೇಳೋದು.
ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಅವಂದಂತ ಯಾರ್ದು ಅಂತ ತೋರಿಸ್ತೀವಿ.
ಇವತ್ತು ಜೈರಾಜ್ ಕತೆ ಅಂತೂ ಮುಗಿಯುತ್ತೆ. ಜೈರಾಜನ್ ಮುಗಿಸ್ತಾ ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಾದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಕೊತ್ವಾಲನ್ ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡಿ ಎನ್ಕೌಂಟ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಪರದಾಗ್ತೀವಿ. ಬ್ಯಾಂಗ್ಳೂರ್ ಟೋಟಲಿ ಸೇಫ್ ಆಗ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ.
ಓ ಕೊತ್ವಾಲ್, ನಿನ್ನ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರ್ನ ನೀನೇ ಇಟ್ಕೋ, ನನಗೆ ನನ್ನ ಮಲ್ಲಿಕಾ ಸಾಕು.
ಆ ದಿನಗಳು ಪ್ರತಿ ಕ್ಷಣ ಹೃದಯದೊಳಗೆ ಹಸಿರಾಗಿದೆ ಅದು ಇದು ನನ್ನ ಬಿಡದೆ.
ನಾವು ಯಾರ ವಿಷಯಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೂ ಹೋಗ್ತೀವಿ. ನಾವು ಒಂಥರ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಇದ್ದಂಗೆ.
ಇಂದಿರಾ ಗಾಂಧಿಯವರು ಚಿಕ್ಕಮಗಳೂರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲೆಕ್ಷನ್ ನಿಂತ್ಕೊಂಡಾಗ ನನ್ನನ್ನು ಕೂರಿಸಿ ಜನನೇ ಈ ಕೊತ್ವಾಲ್ನ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಂದು ನನ್ನ ಜಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂರಿಸಿದ್ರು.
ಜೈರಾಜ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಆಫರ್ನ ರಿಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾನೆ. ಕೊತ್ವಾಲನ ಊರ್ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೋಗೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೇಳಿ ಕಳಿಸಿದ್ದಾನೆ. ಕೊತ್ವಾಲ ಬೆಂಕಿ ಆಗಿದ್ದಾನೆ.
ಈ ಫೈಟಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಏನಾದರೂ ಚಾನ್ಸ್ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದ್ರೆ ಕೊತ್ವಾಲ್ಗೊಂದು ಗತಿ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ಬೇಕು.
1000 ಕೊತ್ವಾಲ್ಗಳು ಬಂದರೂ ನನ್ನನ್ನು ಹೆದರಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯನೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಮಲ್ಲಿಕ.
ಎಲ್ಲಿದ್ಯಾರೇನು?
ನೀವೇ ಇದ್ರು ಇದೇ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರಿ ಸರ್.
मेरे प्यारे देशवासियों, आज मध्य रात्रि 12 बजे से 500 रुपए और 1000 रुपए के करेंसी नोट लीगल टेंडर नहीं रहेंगे.
ಊರಾಚೆ ಲಾಟ್ಗಟ್ಲೆ ದುಡ್ಡನ್ನ ಸುಟ್ಟಾಕಿದಾರಂತೆ.
ಲಾಕ್ ಮನೆ ಇರಬೇಕು.
ಬರಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋ ಅಷ್ಟು ದುಡ್ಡು ಥ್ರೂ RBI ಬ್ಯಾಂಗ್ಳೂರ್ ಟು ಹೈದರಾಬಾದ್ ಬೈ ರೋಡೇ ಬರಬೇಕು, ರೈಟ್?
ಹುಚ್ಚಿ ನನ್ನ ಮಗನೇ, 100 ಕೋಟಿ ಕಣೋ.
100 ಕೋಟಿನಾ?
Welcome to the Freethought Society and American Ethical Union special event featuring actor and social activist Chetan Ahimsa. I hope those of you who logged on early enjoyed the film highlights. If you missed it, you can find a recording of the entire program on the Freethought Society and American Ethical Union YouTube channels in the next few weeks. My name is Jake Ritter, and I am the Program Support and Communications Coordinator at American Ethical Union. It is my pleasure to be the Zoom coordinator and your co-host for today's event. Before we begin, I have just a few housekeeping items to convey. This session is being recorded for replay on social media. By joining the session, you consent to be recorded and agree to abide by the Freethought Society's anti-harassment and code of conduct policy, both of which can be found on the Freethought Society website. For the best viewing, we recommend that you put your Zoom settings on speaker view. That way, you will see the speakers in the best and biggest Zoom box possible. Everyone except the hosts, the speaker, and myself will be muted. Please write your questions down to share when the floor is open for discussions. Your microphone will be unmuted during the discussion time, and we will spotlight you when you speak. If you prefer not to be spotlighted or speak, another option for you is to send me your questions through the Zoom chat. I will ask questions or make comments you send to me on your behalf. Just type "please ask" or "please say," and I'll happily represent you by repeating your question or commentary if you'd like me to. On behalf of everyone at the American Ethical Union, welcome to tonight's event. For those of you not familiar with us, the American Ethical Union is a federation of ethical societies whose mission is to create, nurture, and inspire ethical humanist communities and foster a world that is democratic, compassionate, just, and sustainable. Ethical culture is a humanist movement whose members focus energies on building ethical relationships with each other and the world at large. As a non-theistic organization, the American Ethical Union is guided by our aspiration to build and sustain a culture that helps each person's worth and dignity be realized and appreciated. The American Ethical Union looks to engage the broader public to bring positive social change and address the issues affecting us on a local and global scale. If you are interested in being a part of our effort to be the change you want to see in the world, you can join the American Ethical Union as an individual member. You will find a link to joining the American Ethical Union in the chat. You can also stay up to date with what the American Ethical Union is doing by joining our mailing list or visiting our website, aeu.org. I'm also putting my email in the chat so you can reach me directly. And now, Margaret Downey will tell you about the Freethought Society. Margaret?
Thank you, Jake. Welcome, everyone. We are so pleased to be co-hosting the event with the American Ethical Union. Our groups are similar in so many ways. The Freethought Society serves as a local forum in which free thinkers can meet, socialize, and exchange ideas. The mind of a freethinker is not restrained by superstitions or prescribed dogmas that tell us what we can and cannot think. While some today would suppress independent thought, freethinkers know that the unrestricted exchange of ideas have been the primary forces of progress in all civilizations. As freethinkers, we want to better ourselves and our community through the unrestrained application of reason and human endeavor to address the local and global problems that confront us. The Freethought Society offers many volunteer opportunities, and we hope one of our committees will be of interest to you. You can find a list of our committees on the Freethought Society website and on the back page of our complimentary e-zine. If you would like to receive an e-zine publication notice, please provide me with your email address through a personal message in the chat or contact me at my email address. It is margaret@ftsociety.org. The Freethought Society and the American Ethical Union are nonprofit educational organizations. Therefore, we hope you will be moved to make a donation today. A donation link from the American Ethical Union and the Freethought Society will appear in the chat section a few times during this event. Now, Jake and I will introduce our guest speaker, Chetan Kumar Ahimsa.
Chetan Kumar Ahimsa is an actor from Karnataka, India. He is also a political and social activist. Chetan made his on-screen debut in the 2007 cult classic film A Dinagalu and was awarded Best Actor in the Udaya Film Awards for the film. He received more critical acclaim for his role in the 2009 film Birugali. Following Birugali, Chetan starred in the 2010 and 2013 dramas Suryankanti and Maina, respectively. His upcoming project, action thriller 100 Chorus, comes out later this year. His film career is vast, but of special mention is the 2017 film Athirata. In that film, Chetan received very positive reviews, but the film failed at the box office when right-wing extremists tore down posters and tried to prevent the film from being screened due to Chetan's political stances. An online campaign organized by Hindu fundamentalists boycotted Athirata, citing Chetan's efforts against the caste system in India. Just a few weeks ago, Chetan was arrested for tweeting remarks that the police deemed controversial in defense of a female rape victim. We are so relieved he was released from prison in time for this event. He will be telling us more about that, I'm sure. Chetan will not stop and continues to take acting roles, despite being threatened and even arrested for making what some in India call offensive remarks. Chetan also continues to fight for art, equality, justice, rationality, and nonviolence. Today he will tell us what motivates him to be an activist.
Chetan credits his mother, Mangala Kumar, and his father, Amar Kumar, for providing him with the willpower to continue his important activism work. And I am delighted to call Mangala and Amar dear friends. I'm privileged to see them often. They reside in Roanoke, Virginia, where my son lives and where my grandson attends college. Mangala and Amar are both retired doctors, but they own and operate a school in India. The school provides much needed secular education, and they are very proud of the young minds they have helped develop. Chetan was born in Chicago, Illinois. The family made sure that Chetan and his brother did not forget their India connections. The Kannada language was often spoken in their home. As a young adult, Chetan studied the writings of Erode Ramasamy. Revered as Periyar, Ramasamy was an Indian social activist and politician who started the self-respect movement. Periyar is known as the father of Dravidian, a social movement that advocates to eradicate the ills of the existing caste system, including untouchability. Chetan will now talk about his personal activism, Periyar's importance in India's rational thinking movement, and the influence Periyar had on his own life goals. Welcome, Chetan.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak about Periyar's legacy and interact with so many thoughtful people, many oceans across the world, many oceans over. I want to thank Margaret Downey and the Freethought Society, as well as Jake Ritter, who made the trailer mix, and Hugh Taft Morales of American Ethical Union for giving me this opportunity to talk about Periyarism in the South Asian as well as global context. And I'm interested, I want to express his thoughts, his movements, his fights for justice, and then maybe open it up for questions. And this, a lot of the stuff that I'll be talking about, it's from my own personal research, discussion with a lot of intellectuals, as well as this particular book, which is A Man Ahead of His Time by Balaji Kumar. This is Periyar right here. Extraordinary thinker. Periyar, along with his friend Baba Sahib Ambedkar, who is a Dalit born. Periyar is actually Shudra born. I'll explain these things. These are the two most extraordinary Indians of the 20th century, equality-driven, radical feminists, radical humanitarians, rational thinkers. And Periyar's movement and his political, as cultural nationalism is equality-driven politics, and is also his political legacy is still existent today. And Ambedkar and Periyar are unquestionably the ideological role models today. Gandhi is, I don't even want to say far 30s, way down the line. So Periyar, and I'm happy to be talking about Periyar, but if we want to understand Periyar, we have to understand what is caste and the caste system, which Margaret talks about, and untouchability, because Periyar, these socio-cultural religious foundations are dismantled by Periyar on so many levels. In the region of Tamil Nadu, which is in the southern part, which is an adjacent state to Karnataka, where I reside. These are many, many countries in themselves. Karnataka has about 6.5 crores, which is like about 65 million people, the size of France, the size of Italy. Tamil Nadu is also equally, if not around the same size, if not bigger. So there's quite a bit of so there's a lot of people, and they're nations of themselves, but they're within the union construct of India. But if you want to understand caste, which exists on every single level, political, food habits, housing situation, who you vote for, access to water, access to education, access to resources, access to any kind of life existence, caste, everything is riddled by caste in India. And caste is a very hierarchical system. So let me explain this, like how this boils down is about, we all know about, in India, there's been multiple kind of migrations. And 75,000 years ago is the original migration, which we call Adivasis, who are the tribal community. But the most controversial migration was the post-Harappa Mohenjo-daro, which you might have heard of, the Indus Valley civilization. Post that, about 3,500 years ago, there was this Aryan migration. Margaret mentioned Dravidian, but Aryan migration is very contested because it challenges the whole existence of you can say Hinduism, but you call it Brahmanism, the system of inequality that Periyar and so many other rational thinkers question. Because what happens 3,500 years ago is Max Muller, who's a German philosopher, comes up with the Aryan invasion theory. A lot of people on horses, white-skinned people on horses, come and start attacking brown-skinned people, which is debunked now. It's an Aryan migration theory, which is essentially Central Asian fire worshippers, maybe about 3,500 years ago, who are like pastoral communities, migrate to India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, this region of the world, all South Asia, and they bring with they mate with the normal people and they become a part of the society here. But what they bring with them is essentially Sanskrit, Vedas, cow worship, and the caste system, which is the scriptural and to the scriptural basis that is Hinduism. I will use the word Brahmanism today, which essentially means the same thing. But this is a system of inequality and birth-based inequality, superiority and inferiority that is in the caste system. Caste system has gone through many cycles of rigidity and fluidity. But the word caste actually comes from the Portuguese term, which means race, lineage, or breed. And caste, actually casta, and Portuguese had a very strong role in India, even for 500 years, which is 100 years even before the British came in. So what the caste system is, to explain it to you, is that there are Varna and Jati. Varna is essentially a four-pronged pyramidal division. And it is based on Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya at the top. Brahmin is the priestly class with a very small percentage of men who have access to education, which is Sanskrit education, access to all status and privileges, access to God and religion. And they are the ones who are the superior, most superior. And then you talk about Kshatriya, who are the nobility, and they are the ruling classes. And then you have the Vaishya, who are the business to mercantile. These are the upper caste, and these are the men, because the women don't have access to education. We don't have access to the religious privileges. These men do. Now, by and large, the largest group of people in this are the Shudras. And the Shudras are essentially artisans, working class people working with their hands, the farmers, the people who iron your clothes, the people who make the pots, these are the Shudra communities, who are the working class communities, who are the bottom of the pillar. But now, who are actually extremely discriminated against are the Panchamas. And the Panchamas are the fifth category, which are the Dalits, or the untouchables, which Margaret talks about. And the untouchables are the ones that do the most work that nobody likes when it comes to like carrying human excreta on their head, when it comes to taking care of animal skins, when it comes to anything that is looked at as inhuman. And actually in the Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad, which is a aspect of Vedanta. What it says is like, if you do good work, which means if you actually help the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya men, who are the upper caste, who make up about 15% divided by 2, which is about 7.5%, because men and women, so you're talking about 7%, then you will be born in the next life, a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya womb. If you do bad work, if you do sin, whatever, which means questioning that power structure, then you will be born into a pig, a dog, or a chandala, which is another word from untouchable. So this dehumanization is completely built into this 3.5-year-old scriptural basis. Now, and this hierarchical system continues to exist in every region of the nation to different levels and in different names. And this is endogamous. In other words, they all marry within themselves. Why is this caste system so rigid and so difficult to break? You have to understand is that besides the poles, everybody in between, like you're talking about 90 or 85% people, are both oppressors and the oppressed. They're being oppressed from the people who are above them, but they are doing the oppression to the people who are below them in that scale, caste scale. So that retains the power structure, because very few, except the people on the bottom level who are the untouchables, want to fight this system and want to remove the system and want to annihilate caste, which was a very important aspect of Periyar's movement. And also you have to understand that this is basically religiously mandated. This religiously mandate is based on kind of the past sins makes you an untouchable, the past good deeds makes you reborn as a dominant caste. So there's this internalization, there's no vested interest to take that out, because it's like, hey, I'm here because I've done good, or hey, there's almost a kind of feeling of like, I'm destined to be an untouchable. Well, untouchable means not being able to like, for hundreds of during Periyar's time, no, your shadow should not come out in the daytime in front of like other dominant caste, privileged caste. Your saliva is clearly, you have to wear a span that you cannot, if you saliva, you have to sweep when you go ahead, when you walk the streets. I mean, there's so much dehumanization that is clearly, even today, even though in 1947, it was banned in 1950 when India came, even today, the caste system is so replete. Dalits don't have access to water in Karnataka. Dalits don't have access to a lot of education. They're all first generation education now. Their parents are landless. Their parents are, even today, if a Dalit kid goes into a temple, in many ways, there'll be uproar, there's fines. And the most heinous is like, even to this day, if a Dalit boy consensually goes like absconds with a dominant caste girl, then what happens is, not only is there honor killings, not only is there, the family comes to the powerful communities come and attack, but many times, even to this day, the daughters and the sisters, the wives, not wife, but the mother and the sister of the boy run away, pays a very deep price in that village area. And these kind of realities are still so stark, and only 5% of Indian society is intercaste or interreligion, which means 95% marry within their caste, which continues this caste system. So Periyar, which is extraordinary, Periyar dismantles the system in Tamil Nadu today. Tamil Nadu is the most anti-caste state in the nation. Tamil Nadu is the most equality-driven and rationalist leaders in the nation, progressive thinking. And that is all because of Tamil Nadu, Periyar, who actually for 93 years builds this extraordinary inclusive coalition movement that rattles the power structure in Delhi, which is thousands of kilometers away, that he, through mass mobilization and street fighting. So I did briefly mention about how India is built into an European Union style. It's European Union is obviously, EU is almost like Europe is a continent, but India as a nation is essentially each region, linguistic states. 28 states are almost the linguistic states is the union construct of India, and about 22 we have official languages. And Periyar's language that he fights in is called Tamil, which is even older than Sanskrit, which is a spoken language, which is a Dravidian fight, because Sanskrit, as I mentioned, is the Aryan fight, and Dravidian fight is Tamil and my mother tongue, Kannada, which is also Periyar's mother tongue. So interestingly, even though he's a Kannada mother tongue, he fights in Tamil. So this Dravidian movement is a linguistic battle between the dominant Aryan North Indian upper caste, privileged, access to power, resources, and God, and redemption, versus the Dravidian, who is more of the subaltern, marginalized, deprived communities in terms of education and dignity. Essentially, Periyar's fight is a fight to reclaim human dignity. It's just like we are also human beings to the same level. And that fight is extraordinary. And today, other leaders in Karnataka, other extraordinary people are oftentimes put into are encompassed by the Brahmanistic system. If you look at the Judeo-Christian Islamic religion, there's a kind of exclusivist kind of attitude, because they have, there's a book, there's a prophet who starts a religion, there's some kind of definitive step. But Brahmanism, and if you want to call it Hinduism, or you call it Brahmanism, essentially, which places the caste, this hierarchical birthplace, superiority, inferiority, is actually so encompassing that all the people who fought against that, to many people from Gautama Buddha, I know you know Buddha, who is an extraordinary human being, who is more than a spiritual kind of human being in many ways, is a revolutionary thinker in terms of fighting. And he and other people like Ambedkar, they become completely hijacked within the Brahminical system, and they become extensions of Brahmanism. But why Periyar, and when I bring it to Karnataka, is that I think is so necessary, is that when I talk about Periyar, there's vitriol, there's hate spewed, there's people say bad words. And when they say that, it's evident that Periyar's ideas are still alive, that Periyar's revolution has not been hijacked by the powers to be, by the religious, cultural, spiritual powers that control and dominate the media discourse, the political discourse, all discourses of the Indian subcontinent today. And that's why it's so essential. So Periyar was born on September 17, 1879. Why that date, September 17th, is interesting, is it's the birthday of Prime Minister Narendra Modi too. So what makes it interesting is this year, I saw in 2021, Periyar's birthday was radically appreciated and was all across the nation. And Modi's is clearly going down. And although politically there might be a lot of, but they might come to power, and there was a big elections yesterday, and they continue to come to power. But the legacy of Periyar dead is in fact even more radical than in many ways Periyar alive, which is being seen today, that is transgressing, that is going across state boundaries. And we're very happy that it's going across even national and continental boundaries. And Periyar actually comes from, he's not a Dalit. See, Ambedkar is a Dalit. Periyar is actually a Shudra, which I talked about, which is the artisan working class. He comes from a rich family, a merchant, wealthy family, but it's actually the community, which is the Jati, is the caste, is a Bade, is actually a bangle maker, bangle seller. So that community he comes from in Tamil Nadu, and he's originally from Karnataka. And the word Periyar actually means respected elder. His real name is E.V. Ramasamy Nayakar, and we call him Tande Periyar. Tande means father, Periyar means respected elder. And along with his close friend Ambedkar, who wrote the Constitution, Babasaheb Ambedkar wrote the Constitution. Periyar and Ambedkar are the two extraordinary individuals of the 20th century. They meet several times. They crush binaries. They crush the idea of Hindu-Muslim division. They bring in an alternative. BJP Congress, these kind of Delhi dominant North Indian kind of Hindutva, Hindu ideologies, they offer an alternative, Periyar and Ambedkar. Periyar, what was really extraordinary about him is that he was very witty, very charming. There's a story where Periyar is going, and he's in his older age, and he's already developed a very strong support across the state and the region. And as he's going, there's in India, what is really demeaning culturally is your chappal. And if you hit somebody with a chappal, I'll hit you with a chappal, it's very demeaning, because the way it's built is like the head is where the Brahmins come from, and the feet is where the shoe does, or the bottom rung comes from. And it's kind of like, which is built in the Vedas. So the feet are considered impure. And so if you see in a lot of Indian families, they bow their head to the feet. And this is something they do with a lot of leaders. Periyar never allowed that to happen because it's a very demeaning kind of thing. All his life, he questioned it. But like the chappal incident is very interesting. So he's going in an open top car where there's a lot of his followers, and somebody has put a huge ring of dirty chappals in his essentially way. And Periyar ducks and goes underneath it, and all his followers are running and taking the chappals and use chappals and like sandals. We call it chappals, sandals, and taking them away. And then Periyar goes to his place and he's speaking, and a lot of people give him gifts of different sort and appreciate him. And then Periyar is asked which gift he likes the most, and he says, the gift I like the most is actually that whole garland of dirty, used, and sandals. Why I like that is because all the gifts you guys give me, you could buy at a kind of like a store or a dollar shop that you guys bought at. But the sandals, the used sandals that guy made a garland of, he took so much extensive work to find and put that together that he really obviously he really holds my ideas in some esteem, high or low, obviously low, but he respects it enough to take so much attention to do that. So that is something that I will treasure. So in a way, he was a very witty man. He was a very, even his radical ideas, he brings to a lot of wit. So I know that a lot of people here are free thinkers and are agnostics, atheists. And this is where Periyar becomes very important, because Periyar's ideological consistency and his talk about God and questioning the supernatural is a radical thought in the Indian subcontinent. In the Indian subcontinent, you're talking about God believing, God fearing, religion obsessed, and in the name of, even though constitutionally we're secular, it's like, how can you be more religiously inclusive is called secularism, from the kind of mainstream liberal idea, including all religions into secularism. We all know that the definition of secularism is actually being distant from religion, but that is the exact opposite of the way Indian system works in many ways. So Periyar says, and his famous saying of Periyar, which makes him so controversial today because of the way the political system is, he says, "He who has invented God is a fool. He who propagates God is a scoundrel. He who worships God is a barbarian." So he challenges the power structure in terms of God, like many others do. And his as an atheist, I know we were talking to Margaret and we were all speaking before this started, and Periyar has a lot of respect for, I read in an interview how he has a lot of respect for Robert Ingersoll. And Robert Ingersoll, he says in his interview, "I accepted many of Robert Ingersoll's ideas." And Robert Ingersoll, as you all know, is the 19th century, the great agnostic. And Periyar, although he was an atheist, he valued that agnostic idea and a lot of Robert Ingersoll. And he was very close comrades, friends with a lot of agnostics, such as Ambedkar, and he was inspired by a lot of agnostics, but his ideas were more atheistic driven. And in the Indian context, why this is so important is, as I mentioned, caste and even patriarchy, where women are that women of all castes, even Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, who are the upper caste women, were not given access to education. Were also essentially treated like Shudras because of they weren't allowed to wear this sacred thread that the upper caste were, that Periyar actively fights against, and as a radical feminist. But the power, essentially what Periyar does, which makes him, I don't want to call him our prophet, but our ideological kind of leader, is that he fights all power structures. All the power structures are essentially interconnected. I would say maybe in the global context that I don't know, but at least in the Indian context, socioeconomic, gender, linguistic, political, cultural, regional, spiritual, all power structures are inherently connected. And he fights them all intellectually and through street fighting. Through street fighting, mass mobilization, he fights them all. Ambedkar is more of an intellectual head who writes 22 volumes, who's clearly an intellectual giant. But Periyar's is he comes to the streets and he rattles up the system. And that is the way, the transformative change that he does. And there was an interesting story about Ambedkar and Periyar. Ambedkar writes the Constitution and he interacts with Periyar. And this is in about 1947, 49, 50. And then Periyar says, yes, Mr. Ambedkar, you have given an extraordinary constitution for people of all religion and all rights. But where is our rights as atheists and agnostics in this constitution? So that rationalist thinking kind of struck me, inspired me. And I know that in the American context about how maybe about 30% or so are like atheist agnostics, but this is like something that is not in any way like a solid group of people there are no policies that I have seen. Maybe I have been out of the loop for 17 years since I've been in India, but the policies are not in any way connected to the atheist agnostic kind of community ideologically in any way. But I am somebody who's a very big fan of somebody who, like Periyar and like Ambedkar, who transcends identity. Even though he's a man, he fights for gender equality. Even though he's maybe a Shudra caste, he fights for Dalit equality and all types of mobilization. Even though he might be a Kannada mother tongue, he fights for Tamil movement. I mean, he transcends identity and makes an ideological fight, which is extraordinary. He's also somebody like, I'm a fan of Bernie Sanders. And what Bernie has done in a way, I've been out of the loop in about a couple of years because the access to some of the stuff that's going on, I'm not aware. But as born into a Jewish family, he has become a role model for a lot of the Muslim world, who has been dominated by a lot of foreign policy dominance from a lot of the European and Western powers. And that is extraordinary that he can do that. And even so, in a way, that kind of rising above identity and standing for an ideology, regardless of what you're born into, is something that Periyar does in the 20th century in America, in India, and in Tamil Nadu, and in the Dravidian movement. And two people who have inspired me to read Periyar, to study Periyar, and to kind of internalize Periyar's ideas are my father, who has been an extraordinary atheist, and he's a brilliant thinker, and my professor at Yale, Barney Bate, who was a white man, but a feminist and a Tamil anthropologist and a Tamil scholar, who also gave me a lot of ideas about Periyar and taught me to view the world through his angles. So these are some of the extraordinary ideas. And one of the things Periyar does is that even though he comes from a privileged family, see, I also connect to that as somebody who comes from economically strong family. We use those abilities as much as possible, whatever financial and educational and caste privilege. I also come from a Shudra dominant caste politically in Karnataka, but it's a Shudra community. And you use all the abilities that you have unjustly gained by birth almost, to fight that power structure that you are the beneficiary of, that Periyar inspires us. So one time when I was having a conversation with my brother, and we were both in our 20s, and my brother has led extraordinary movements against the Iraq War in the US, and he's now a professor, a Marxist professor in England. And when we were discussing, we both in our 20s said, we must use our privileges to, in our own way, make the world a better place in the best of our ability. I took up socio-cultural, linguistic kind of fights with a slice of economics. My brother was a strong economics fighter, but economics was the base, and he became a Marxist thinker. So actually, interestingly, when we talk, he was like, "Yo, man, you have to read a lot more about Marx and build the economic understanding, because 20th century has had extraordinary global movements in terms of economic liberation and in so many financial kind of ways, revolutionary movements around the world." And I said, yeah, man, I need to study economics, but you have to understand that for thousands of years, casteism has been so debilitating that fighting the caste system with an understanding of the horrors of capitalism, which is intertwined, and patriarchy and communalism today in India, if you understand that, these kind of fights against caste system for thousands of years, they've created so many religions. You say revolutionary movements around the world in the 20th century. We're talking about religions here that are like anti-caste movements. So the anti-caste movement in India, there's no way you could build a strong, sustainable movement for change if you don't acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is the caste in India. Periyar, his wife also, and his sister both get involved in the movements, struggles for equality. And when he's incarcerated, Periyar is incarcerated 80 times, 23 times in 15 years. His wife Nagamala leads the movement, and that's extraordinary. And I would always tell my wife Megha about this stuff. And we got married 2 years ago, inspired by Periyar. I'll talk about that. But like and when I was in jail for 6 days, and a lot of violations by the police, and a lot of outcry in general, that she took it by storm, and she was a very strong force. And it's very important that the family is completely involved. And my parents, my brother, and I'm really thankful that Megha also got involved. And Periyar's ideas about child rearing is also something that informs both Megha and I. Periyar actually believes that he looks at, because he's a radical feminist, he looks at, and he's a extraordinary equality-driven guy, he looks at pregnancy as an enemy, because it impedes women's liberation. Because in the Indian context, this idea of 50-50 child rearing is not mainstream. It's clearly the woman ends up taking all responsibility, and the woman is forced to take all responsibility. And so it impedes women's liberation. It also makes freedom for men go in. It makes them, according to Periyar, selfish. So it makes, and so me and Megha, since if we can't contribute completely, obviously, to being parents, and it'll compromise whatever movement we are building. We have been inspired by Periyar, who did not have children. He had one daughter, and she died in 5 months, and he never had children. And Megha and I are deciding also not to have children, because it's which is a very unusual step in India, because there's, as you know, a huge population, and then if you get married, you have to have kids, and everybody gets married, so everybody has kids. So it's like Periyar has inspired us to do that, and we're taking that forward. And Tamil movement. See, in America, if you look at the diaspora essentially is Gujarat and Punjab, which is North India based, are the majority of the diaspora Indian Americans. But the strongest people who retain their language, because in India, if you actually see, even somebody who doesn't know how to read and write knows about 6 or 7 languages. A taxi driver, people working in the streets, they all know, somebody selling some food in the street knows 6 or 7 languages, because it's such a 22 official languages, thousands of languages, your mother tongue, the state language, English, Hindi on top of it, a neighboring state's language, you know all those. But in America, even the most extraordinarily educated PhD scholar oftentimes only knows one language. So Periyar's Tamil identity and Tamil language identity, a lot of the students that inspired us were a lot of Tamil mother tongue people who retained their language, and we retained it. My parents did it for Kannada, which was very important. And the movement that Periyar built in the 1960s was a radical fight against Hindi dominance from the PM, Lal Bahadur Shastri, second PM, and 500 to 600 people die in Tamil Nadu in the 60s, which for the sake of preserving language rights. And what had happened is the prime minister was supposed to remove English and keep only Hindi as the official language. And once Periyar in his massive movement opposed that, and 500, 600 people died, the prime minister accepts it, keeps English, and subsequently, 1967, Periyar's political movement, which wasn't an election movement, but Periyar's political movement actually materializes. And since 1967 till 2022, the parties, the Dravidian parties, the pro-regional kind of rationalist, anti-caste, anti-patriarchy, more equality-driven politics of Tamil Nadu, these political parties continue to exist, which is the opposite of Karnataka. In Karnataka, the two dominant parties, even though we're an adjacent state, are the two Delhi parties, are the centrist parties. But in Tamil Nadu, the two political parties and multiple political parties that exist are Dravidian parties, all inspired by Periyar. And actually, interestingly, Periyar meets Gandhi. And Periyar actually, when he's a young guy, he joins the Congress party because he's inspired by Gandhi. But in 1919 and 1925, he's completely mesmerized by Gandhi. But what happens is in 1925, there is in Viacom, there's a street where Dalits are not allowed to go. Dalits, as you know, are the untouchables. Dalit means broken people. And that's a Marathi word, which is like kind of an empowering term, but it's the untouchables are not allowed to go in that street. Periyar allows them and fights for them and leads them with them to go to that street in front of the temple, which is the Viacom temple entry. Now, what happens is Gandhi and the Congress Party, and Periyar used to be in the Congress Party, Gandhi opposes it. Gandhi opposes it and says, no, Dalits should not be allowed, because Gandhi is essentially a status quo caste Hindu leader who continues the existing power dynamic in the name of religious inclusivity. But Periyar fights that. Once Periyar realizes that Gandhi is not is not for the Dalits to go in, he completely comes out of the Congress Party. He joins the Justice Party in Tamil Nadu, and all his life he opposes Gandhi, and all Gandhi's life, because Periyar lives much longer, he's antagonistic towards Gandhi, who is completely Brahminical. And in 1927, if I'm correct, even Periyar's nonviolence is extraordinary nonviolence. Gandhi doesn't have a patent over nonviolence. Periyar's nonviolence is more radical nonviolence, is more mobilization, is even extraordinary nonviolence. And in fact, he meets Gandhi in 1927 in Bangalore, which is my home city, and they have an interesting interaction. And when Gandhi, who's a huge celebrity, international celebrity, who is the Mahatma, which Periyar clearly finds absurd as a rational thinker, what is this Mahatma? Then once Gandhi is killed in 1948 by Brahminical forces, Periyar weeps. He weeps and he says, my strongest opposition is now killed. We want to defeat you in the battleground of ideas, and violence is used to kill him. So he weeps, but all his life, Ambedkar and Periyar completely opposed the Indian National Congress, the Gandhi model, the Nehru model, and they build an alternative model. That is the model we need today, the Periyarite model. And I talked about the revolutionary feminists, and actually revolutionary feminists thinking of Periyar, and a lot of it, he creates this kind of self-respect marriage. The marriages in India are like, if you actually, there's a Brahmin priest who says to the woman, actually in Sanskrit, he says, the woman, the bride, must first be given to all the gods and then given to the priest, and then she goes to the husband in some kind of donation, commodifying way. He also says in Sanskrit so many things about how if the husband says the moon is the sun, the bride or the woman should blindly accept that because he is the husband. So these kind of completely misogynistic ideas and patriarchal ideas are inbuilt within the marriage practices in India, and he builds a self-respect marriage, which Megha and I incorporated 2 years ago in our marriage. We got married in the court. We had no religious anything. We had no religious markers of any sort, and we got married in a Special Marriage Act. Special Marriage Act means there's Hindu Marriage Act, there's Muslim Marriage Act, there's Christian Marriage Act, and there's Special Marriage Act. Special Marriage Act allows us to be non-religious, non-identifying, which the extraordinary thing about Periyar is, like, he teaches us that just like people of all religions and all faiths have the rights under the Indian Constitution, we also, who belong to no religion, who espouse no God, either 33 or a single God, we have equal rights in the Indian Constitution, which is definitely something that we hold true. And in fact, India, why has India produced so many religions? Because the Brahmanism, which is the Hindu caste system, which is the kind of basis of the Hindu religion for the past 3,500 years, is so seeped in inequality that any extraordinary radical thinker who fights that for equality develops his or her own religion. So you're talking about Buddha, which is Buddhism, Mahavira, which is Jainism, Guru Nanak, which is Sikhism, Basavanagudi, which is Lingaitism, and even Periyar's idea, self-respect movement, in the future can be an extraordinary religion in of itself, which is recognized by the Indian government. Which is, what is a religion but an ideology with an army? And what is an army? could be scriptures, it could be a founder, it could be people strength, it could be anything that it can be governments, it could be nations, but it's just an army. So Periyar's ideas also, even atheism, even anti-establishment, even equality-driven ideas that Periyar can be argued that it itself is a religion. And Periyar actually comes out of jail. He goes to jail 80 times. He comes out of jail. He keeps fighting. And this time, even though I was in jail and I've always fought for workers' rights, for women's rights, for farmers' rights, for language rights, the people who stood with me, who fought at the police station, who came when I came out, who led movements were the Dalit activists. So I have a lot of respect for the Dalit movements in India and Karnataka, and these are the ones who are who can change the political outlook of society and create massive change. And in Karnataka, Dalit means blue. And blue means, what is blue? Why did they take a blue color? Is because the sky is blue and everyone underneath the sky is equal. And that ideology, so in Periyar takes a black, and black is a symbol of atheism and anti-religiosity. So this blue and black combination is something that we definitely need. And finally, before finishing up, there's triggering points as a question. I mean, sometimes it's cinematically, people always say there's one single triggering point that makes you kind of fight against the system. And Periyar's triggering point, they say he's a young guy, he's a flamboyant young guy, and he goes to Varanasi, which is the bedrock of Brahmanism, which is Kashi, which is a North Indian city. And he's very hungry. And he's so hungry that he is he sees in a place that says only Brahmins are allowed, and Brahmins are allowed to eat. And he goes there, they don't allow him. So he actually wears a Janavara, which is the sacred thread. And he pretends to be a Brahmin and get it. But the guy at the door looks at him, he's like, you have too big of a mustache, you're not a Brahmin. And he kicks him out. So he goes hungry. So because of that, he ends up having this triggering point that ends up it's not one, obviously, but it ends up creating this anti-caste feeling in him, and he mobilizes it. For me personally, if I have to say a certain triggering point, I was 14 years old. I was going to a Catholic high school in Chicago. I was a freshman, and it was 1998. And then I had a math teacher the math teacher was it was a kind of accelerated math class, and he was a very political, very right-wing thinking. And I remember at that time, 1998, the Indian there was a kind of jingoistic kind of central government party which set off nuclear bomb testing, Pokhran testing. And that math teacher, Mr. Glennon, asked me, he said, Kumar, India considers itself the land of Gandhi. So what is it doing testing a nuclear bomb? Now I answered, I was young, we had a lot of discussions in the house, and I said, Mr. Glennon, whether India should or should not test the bomb is a secondary question. The primary is that a nation which has used it twice, and that to kill the lakh people, has no moral authority to question it. America doesn't have a moral authority to question. And I said that, and I was young, and I didn't realize the gamut of what would happen afterward. And it was just like the whole administration and him, they start going, they're like, you're anti-national, you're anti-American, you're spoiling these white kids, you're messing with his minds, you're this and that. And it became that particular moment where I, being a non-Catholic, non-white, in a 2,000 students of that all essentially were, I had a choice where I was just like, I was like, either you keep quiet and accept, or you come out and fight. And then I took this path that we come out and fight. And I actually, by the time I was 18 years old, and I ended up being valedictorian of my class, but they didn't want to give me, because I was in punishment all the time, and I was always questioning and challenging, but my academic record was still strong. So generally the people who are the valedictorian, you get a chance to speak. So I was given a chance I wasn't given the chance to speak because they were afraid of what I was going to say. So then the teachers supported me, and some teachers, they said, you must give Chetan the right to speak. And they're like, okay, if we're going to give Chetan the right to speak, then we have to have his speech beforehand. He has to practice and everything. And I remember it was a Friday night, and I practiced. I gave them my speech and everything. And it was a Friday night, and I got up on stage and I ad-libbed. I added whatever I wanted to do. I talked about how I said, you know, we all know the Catholic Church in the past 500 years, what it's done. Remember, it was just different. I was young, and I said, we all know, everybody knows that Jesus wasn't a white man, he was a man of color like us. So I started talking, I started just saying what happened to the mayor's family, and I questioned it quite a bit. They ended up turning off the mic. They ended up erasing me from the video. They ended up threatening me, and there was rumors that I'd already gotten accepted to college by that point, but there were rumors they didn't give me a diploma. But anyways, it became quite, I was always very I always had a very negative feeling about my high school. But then what changed that was, I don't know if you know this girl from Chicago, Anne Smedinghoff. And when I was about 10 years ago, I read about how she was from a rival Catholic school and how she went to Afghanistan, and she went to provide books and teach. And she was very wanted to do good work in Afghanistan educationally, and she was killed in a bomb blast. And that really struck me, that even if I had it maybe difficult in some ways in high school, there were extraordinary people in these Catholic high school. And then I started realizing that it's like there were really a lot of good people. I shouldn't be judging the entire experience by a math teacher. So Anne Smedinghoff is somebody who's somebody I respect a lot, from Chicago, Catholic schoolgirl who lost her life in doing a great thing. So these are the kind of things that kind of spurred me. So what I'd like to say just at the end is that we've all heard of Gandhi and Nehru. Gandhi and Nehru are they're the Brahmanism of the Congress Party. That is the old story. Today, what is the reality in India is the Savarkar Upadhyaya, who's more of the BJP communal, hyper-nationalist, anti-minority. That is what religious minority, what is going on right now. What I say is the future is Periyar and Ambedkar, the ideas of equality. That is the future. That is what we're building. That is what is, and justice is something that we need for Dalits, for marginalized, for women, for religious minorities, for all the poor. So that is something that the Periyar model has taught us. So we are in the process of building that on the ground in Karnataka, and it's making a lot of headway around the nation. And of course, mainstream media is not really bringing that to foreground all the time, because it's a corporate Brahminical kind of capitalistic media. But we have social media, we have alternative media, which is doing extraordinary work on the ground in Karnataka. So it's growing day by day. I've been involved in it for 17 years, 10 years, 11 years actively. Every day it's growing. And if they're putting me in jail for a tweet, it's a really harmless tweet I wrote. It actually, I questioned, it was almost like innocuous. I was struck, I was completely blown away that they're going to make such a big deal out of this. I felt it was something that their intention was to put in jail, not really to find fault, not really to punish a wrong. It was like, let's put them in jail and let's figure out how we could do that, which is actually helping our movement in actuality, spreading the word even more. People who never knew about our ideas are like, maybe there's something there. So it's actually helping the movement. But of course, it comes with its own professional and personal risks. I'm very thankful to my parents and my wife for standing behind it, and my brother and everybody in the movement. But it's good things are happening. So that's what I have to say. I want to thank everybody for giving me the opportunity to speak. I want to apologize for any kind of technical problem from my side. I really apologize for it. And thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chetan. Audience members, please join me in a round of applause for Chetan's presentation.
Thank you.
Now, before we open the question and answer section of this presentation, I remind the audience that the Freethought Society and the American Ethical Union depend on donations to offer educational programs and speakers who enlighten and motivate. So please see the chat section of the Zoom to get a direct link to the Freethought Society and the American Ethical Union donation page. And any donation would be appreciated. And now Jake will tell you how to participate in the question and answer session.
Thank you, Margaret. First of all, I just want to thank Chetan for first a great speech, and also for powering through sticking with some of the technical difficulties on
No,
our
not a
end.
problem. Not a problem.
But really appreciate learning more about the background of the movement, your experience, and really hearing about how from one side of the world to the other, we're all dealing with similar challenges and also trying to overcome them through our sheer passion of trying to make the world a better place. So it's really nice to be able to see your efforts and to see how you're fighting the good fight. So
Thanks a
now
lot,
to go-
Jake.
my pleasure. So to go for the Q&A portion, if you'd like to ask our speaker a question while being spotlighted, please use the reactions and raise hand function in your Zoom window. It will put you into our queue and we'll call on you in the order of hands raised. If you'd prefer not to be spotlighted, and would rather have me ask a question on your behalf, please send your question to me, Jake Ritter, in the Zoom chat, and I'll be happy to ask on your behalf. We actually have one question that way before got lost in the mixture. I think I actually lost the question, but I'll keep an eye out for it when it comes back up. So for anyone looking to ask a question, please raise your hand and we'll me and the fellow co-host will pick you out on a first come first serve, and you could ask Chetan himself.
I've got 100 questions, but I've got to be calling on others, so I'll wait.
Does anyone have their hand raised? Christina.
There we go.
Oh yeah, well, I was curious as to what the tweet was that you.
Yeah, it was actually, so right now in Karnataka, there's a very explosive issue that is going on. And it's like are hijabs permitted in government schools? And hijab, as you know, it's the head covering that Muslim girls wear. So it's in colleges and high schools. So it has become a communal anti-Muslim, but at the same time, Muslim identity in this communal, because Karnataka is run by the right-wing state, the government, and so it's the Hindu-Muslim fight that they're tugging at. So a judge is actually, Krishna Dikshit is actually determining whether hijabs should be allowed or not allowed in government school. Now, I put up a post, from 2 years ago, I wrote about this judge, and this judge actually, in a rape case, he gives pre-arrest bail to the accused, saying the victim has slept after rape. Indian women don't sleep after rape, so she wasn't raped. So I said, this is like some kind of this is misogyny. Who is this fossil? And I just put up something back in 2020. I realized that's the same judge who's determining the hijab case. Hijab, as you know, is not just religious. It's not just cultural. It's not just educational in this context. It's not just uniformity that we're discussing. It's also a gender issue. So I put up, this guy is the same guy who's determining that case. He's made this statement in the past, attaching that tweet. Does he have the clarity required to make the right or an appropriate or judgment? Because he had the clarity required. I just put a question mark. It was a very innocuous tweet, and actually judges in the Indian Penal Code, Section 21, are also public servants. But there were a lot of powerful people, from the chief minister to other people, they claim, I'm not sure, and to judges, possibly executive, legislative, and judicial, who were involved in getting the police to file a suo motu case to kind of put me behind bars for 6 days, which I mean, you get into activism, you got to be ready to go to jail, even if it's on spurious fabricated charges. But it's like, I realized the amazing potential of social media and how this government takes a relatively innocuous tweet so seriously, because freedom of speech, freedom of expression is being criminalized on a large level by the government in play today. And they're threatened by ideas of Periyar, who is and Ambedkar, who you bring to the foreground. But that was the tweet.
Thanks. I see Hans has got his hand raised.
Yeah, there's actually one thing I wanted. Oh, sorry. One thing I wanted to add. First, Hans, what Chetan was talking about really reminded me of a former senator named John Lewis, who talked about getting into good trouble. And it seems that's exactly what you're doing, being able to stand by your ideals and risking it for the greater good. So that's something that just kind of triggered in my mind.
Brilliant, Jake. We definitely believe in good trouble. We have to, like, issues of marginalized subaltern communities. You talk about untouchables and unseeables, and their struggles are never acknowledged by the mainstream media or the general public. They are the only ones fighting their fight, and they are so economically, socially, completely exploited and marginalized that they don't have their voice is not heard. We have to kind of provoke those issues. As somebody who has some presence in Karnataka as a whole as an actor, we find excuses to provoke these issues and put them on the main stage, so the mainstream media actually talks about it, acknowledges it. And something like caste is completely, especially what the Dalits go through, what the Adivasis go through, what so many women in these communities go through, is never acknowledged. So we provoke, and good trouble, as you said, is something that we definitely, and John Lewis, his civil rights contribution is something we admire a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry to steal your thunder, Hans. You have the floor now.
Okay, thank you. Well, Chetan, thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate, in particular, that you introduced me to the Periyar, who's a scholar I want to learn more about. And you reminded me of something that I saw on social media, apropos to no particular topic, but it was like a graffiti on a wall that said, "Just because it doesn't happen to me doesn't mean it doesn't matter to me." And so that seems apropos to your talk today. But that leads into my particular question, which is earlier, before we were so rudely interrupted by technology misbehaving, you mentioned something about using your own privilege to disrupt your own privilege.
Absolutely.
And if I may elaborate just a bit, I'm a white person. I grew up in the southern U.S., and I've become keenly aware, disappointed, and embarrassed at some of the things that my ancestors have done in this part of the country to Black and Indigenous people. And what I find is I can move in white spaces more freely, speak more freely than my Black and brown compatriots in that work. And I'm curious to, if you can elaborate a little bit more on what it means to you in your work to use your own privilege to undermine privilege.
Hans, you make a brilliant point. We kind of, I've heard somebody use the term, and it's kind of funny, we're almost like cultural or inequality suicide bombers, almost as if you kind of take on your own kind of privilege, and you question it and you challenge yourself, and for the sake of a larger good, which is what Periyar does, which is as an economically privileged, as a caste. He doesn't come from the Dalits, he comes from a Shudra, which is, although it is on the bottom of the totem pole, it's not completely exploited to the same level as Dalits are. And he is obviously a man, and all these factors, he uses that to challenge that system. So even we self-question today in every single way in Karnataka. I am probably unjustly, even when unjustly, the most privileged person I know. And the privilege, obviously, we have a house. We might not be one of the richest people, but in terms of education, in terms of the fact that in films, the actor's role is so relatively insignificant for the success of a film compared to the writer or director. But the writer and the director can't make a living, while I have massive cutouts, I get a bloated salary and all these kind of benefits for somebody else's actual contribution, creative contribution, which is unjustifiably benefiting me. And of course, the caste system, which is like my generations of educational access, my mother and father, who might not have financial benefit at the beginning, had dominant caste education, and that allowed them to go to America and we had the financial privilege. So in every way, I have been benefited by this system. And what is justice? But justice is righting the wrongs of the past. and you start to right the wrongs of the past by challenging yourself. And although you might I'm the beneficiary of patriarchy and capitalism and education and caste system, you can challenge that for a larger good while saying, because of that privilege, I have to do more. I have to give back more. I have to put more back in. In this movement, I or my family is clearly the wealthiest in the movement, because in the movement we have only like low income and low caste, and this is the strong and the workers and the farmers. So we put in everything financially, and we should put more. And in the movement, it's led by the subaltern and the lower caste, but like I shouldn't take up that space. They should be in that space. I should be the back support in whatever way I can. They should be leading the movement. But at the same time, this is not an identity fight. It's an ideology fight. And they means anybody with that ideology, but of course, with appropriate representation from all communities, gender, caste, class, region, linguistic, etc.
You has his hand up.
Yeah, if I can jump in here, because some of what you told me, I was just amazed to hear. And I'm trying to get a clearer view of how you are swimming in the stream in India of activism. You mentioned that only 5% of people are considered intercaste. Did I get that right?
Intercaste or interreligious marriages today are only 5%. So 95% of marriages, see, there's no love marriage is what we call, which is essentially non-arranged. Arranged marriages are the norm. And when you arrange a marriage, the families arrange the marriage. And what the families arrange the marriage, they arrange it according to their caste, on even subcaste, which is thousands of castes and subcastes. So how caste system continues to exist today is through endogamy. Endogamy obviously means marrying within your own caste, vocational kind of tribe mindset. Now, when you have love marriages, which is obviously what we have in America, when you have those, you marry somebody you connect with, compatibility issues. But here, 95%, and even if there are love marriages, they find somebody of their own caste and get married because of that built-in kind of casteism. So 95% of the marriages statistically are within the same caste, and only 5% are intercaste, even in 2022. And Ambedkar Periyar always believed in intercaste marriages and pushed for those. And that's why Periyar set up a self-respect kind of movement and marriage setup that, like, it doesn't matter what caste or religion or economic background you come from. We have no markers, or the markers are led up to the freedom of the individual, and creates that paradigm which challenges the Brahminical caste-based marriage structure.
Amazing. Thank you. Margaret?
I raised my hand.
You got it.
Speaking of marriages, your parents shared your wedding pictures with me, and it was thrilling to know how the marriage unfolded, how your reception unfolded, the gifts you gave away. And I want you to share that with the people on this Zoom, because I was amazed.
We essentially had our marriage in a court marriage. It was a registered marriage where we married under the Special Marriage Act. So we didn't define ourselves according to any religion. And marriages in India are marriages anywhere are a very big deal, but marriage in India is a huge kind of like business industry obsession. And like our kind of activism, whatever we do, I am challenged. But when we did this activism through marriage, there was very little challenging, which shocked me. I'm like, we are taking such a kind of non-religious, non-opulent, simple, non-religious wedding, challenged through the Periyarite model, challenging the system of Brahmin kind of intermediaries, Sanskrit, religion, all forms, but there wasn't very much antagonism, shockingly, because it almost was like, marriage is your call. that's your choice, and we're not gonna like mess with that, which was nice of them. But after marriage, there's been plenty of mudslinging. But even the marriage, we had it at an orphanage. At our reception, we had it in an orphanage. We did not believe that we should have it in any kind of, in any kind of special place. It should be some place where we have a meaningful connection with the people there. And there was about 50, 60 orphaned kids and a lot of older people who are neglected. We built the orphanage in many ways, the wall, we painted everything. We completely revamped the orphanage, and then we had our event there through it was a very grassroots model, and people from all across the state. I actually gave only 300 cards. We had about 3,500, 4,000 people, because it was kind of a celebration for everybody from the movement that just joined in and came from all across the state and nation. And it was, I'm really thankful that not only my parents, but Megha, who comes from an Orthodox family, who comes from a religious family, I actually told her, I said, we can't, a couple things, there's no question of doing anything religious. And I told her that, and she's like, I agree. And she convinced her parents. And that was actually, it kind of made me realize that even in the Indian marriage setup, you can question the societal norms if both partners hold strong. It's the fact that in the arranged marriage setup, the boy and the girl don't know each other, and they can't fight for what is right because the families have made this alliance. So they are subject to the existing kind of unequal kind of top-down hierarchical system, superstitious system, which they play into, because first of all, for very many reasons, but we could do it together. And Megha and I didn't give her a ring. She asked for a ring. I said, I can't give you a ring. We don't believe in all this marker. So I didn't give her any ring. I didn't give her anything. She accepted it. But one of my favorite photographs is that she's in her Indian clothes, and as am I, in the marriage setup, and she's signing the register, and which is a very Periyarite kind of revolutionary step, because never do people see a bride signing a document as her marriage. You always see it in a very kind of large scale religious kind of way. So that was something that Karnataka audience supported, and we are very inspired by Periyar thinking because of that.
But you didn't accept gifts, you gave gifts.
Yeah, we gave gifts. We didn't accept gifts. We gave an Indian constitution to everybody, a book on the Indian constitution, and we had we had an LGBTQ transgender woman read out our vows that we wrote. And we actually wrote 3 vows, one was a personal vow where we said, obviously in Indian tradition, it's like generally Hindu culture or even Indian culture, it's more like the girl is a property. She comes and she takes care of the boy's family and the boy's parents. And the question is what happens to the girl's parents? So clearly daughters are a liability in Indian context. So we both stood and said, we'll take care of both sets of parents. It'll be a 50-50 kind of thing. And of course, number 2, that was the personal vow. The societal vow was a vow that was about eliminating all forms of discrimination and equality to the best of our ability. And the 3rd was a nature vow, where we obviously believed in nature, plants, all life, and nonviolence in that way. So these 3 vows we wrote, and a transgender woman who is an activist, and who are actually considered inauspicious in the Indian context. They're actually, they're considered, they're never given jobs. Their only work is sex work and begging. And so transgender, and there was a lot of criminalization of the transgender community in India up till it was removed about 3 or 4 years ago. Their entire existence was criminalized, sexual habits, sexual kind of practices. So we intentionally brought in transgender woman activists to lead that. And it was, and all the music we had was completely grassroots kind of music and everything that we did, and it was a celebration for the movement, which I was thrilled about. But there's a lot to be done, and I'm very happy that a lot of people were inspired from that, and they started doing their own kind of non-religious and giving an Indian constitution, because today the Constitution of India is an extraordinary document, especially the preamble, written by Periyar's friend Ambedkar, who was a Dalit, and he was just extraordinarily progressive. And the people who are actually fighting to retain that constitutional ethos are the people in our movement. So we claim the Constitution, and we must uphold the Constitution. So that is something that we gifted to all the people in.
A long time ago, a friend of mine, Babu from India, he told me that the Indian Constitution actually has a clause that states it's the duty of every citizen to learn science. Is that true?
There is definitely an aspect of rational thinking that is an aspect in the Constitution. It clearly says rationality, but at the same time, there's a lot of the document. It's a lot of it is in the interpretation. There's a lot of kind of religious-based elements in the Constitution. For example, there's civil code that is based on religion. So in actuality, if you are, for example, if you are a Muslim, you will get certain religious-based kind of civil liberties, that civil rights that, for example, somebody might not be, somebody who's an atheist or somebody of different religion might not get. So there's certain kinds of the Constitution definitely we want to make it even more progressive, but it's definitely an extraordinary document, especially the preamble. It clearly states equality, justice, secular, socialist, which is obviously an egalitarian ideal that we try to live through, but Indian society is far from that currently, but we're working on it.
Jake, you're up. Unmute yourself, Jake. Yeah.
Yep, that helps to talk. One thing that I was really struck by, Chetan, you mentioning was taking on causes and being active voices for things that may not directly affect you, and that really reminds me of allyship and being able to be a strong ally. I was wondering, for a lot of like-minded people here, what are some of your suggestions on ways that we can best use our voices and be allies for those being greatly affected by injustices?
See, we look at everything in terms of obviously fighting the power structure that is clearly promotes and maintains inequality, caste, class, gender, regional, linguistic, and all types of inequality. But we fight that, and how we fight that is through three clear ways. Number one, social and people interactions, whether that be social media and mostly going out to public. See, even today in India, a lot of people don't have, the youth do to some level have access to social media, but a lot of people in the outside the city are not in touch with social media and don't have the kind of educational skills that allows them to be connected to social media or reach on that. So you have to go to the people. So I always say to them, I say, maybe Facebook, Instagram, Twitter have been maybe 20 years something maybe, and maybe internet has been like 40, 50 years. Cinema, which is a very powerful media, but does not in any way create structural change. It's an entertainment media. It's a commercial media. I say it's been around for about 100 years, but going to the people, standing with them in their times of crisis and speaking truth to power, speaking about equality and justice has been on for thousands of years. So we must connect to the people by going to them. Our sphere of influence is Karnataka, which is, I told you, size of France and Italy in population and essentially size. And we go to every district, we mobilize. And that is one way of interaction, social media, people, this and that, speeches. And number two, we talk about social service. We do a lot of social service, but the social service, essentially social service consolidates the power structure. But at the same time, it's very important that we do social service because it's like, and in a counter establishment way, because it's like, it connects with the people. In India, there's a lot of, maybe everywhere in the world, there's a lot of hot air, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of nice language that people use. But if we really want to connect with them emotionally, really want to connect with them viscerally, it's very important that you do that social work and you interact with them on a meaningful, wholesome, truly emotional connection that you have. And number three, we say, along with social work and people's awareness. Number three, the most important way of fighting the system is through activism. And we mobilize massive movements in the street, and Periyar is an extraordinary inspiration for mobilizing massive movements in the street, because even his movements in Tamil Nadu in the 50s and 60s and 40s, 50s and 60s, completely thousands of kilometers away, even without media access, completely altered the power structure in Delhi, in the capital. So you don't have to be breathing down their necks. You can fight the system where you are locally and have an international impact, national impact, something that obviously Periyar shows us. So we fight in Karnataka, and we come to the streets, and we mobilize all groups, any marginalized, economically, socially, gender-wise, linguistic-wise, anyway, religiously marginalized. We join with them. Youth, we mobilize. Work students, we mobilize. So we basically, and we go to schools, we interact with the students. Obviously, if you look at the kind of Hindutva, which is the overarching ideology of anti-Muslim, anti-Christian kind of Hindu nationalism that is today in power, both in the center and in Karnataka, this is not something that started yesterday or the day before. For 100 years, they have worked on the grassroots. They have, I don't know if you want to say brainwashed, but they have or poisoned, but they have conditioned the minds of the youth, and they have worked hard for a hate ideology. We must be willing to work harder for an ideology of love and equality and peace and goodness, and something that Periyar stood for. So it'll take time. You have to be patient. We're not trying to capitalize in any way, whether it be politically or in any other way. We want just selfless, good work. And there are a lot of people in Karnataka that are doing it. So these are the three ways: people's awareness, social service, and activism.
I've been wanting to ask you for a long time, ever since I got to know your parents, but have you heard of the Atheist Center in India? It was started by Gora.
By who?
Gora.
Gaurav. No, what city is it in?
I knew you would ask that, and I'm trying to find the actual name of the city. I think it starts with a K.
Kolkata. It might be Kolkata.
Yes.
I thought of Kolkata. Bengal is northeast. It has a lot of progressive influence from for many hundred years. In fact, Bengal is where the British first entered in 1757, and Bengal is where a lot of opposition came out against the British. And so Bengal has been a very instrumental state in terms of politics in the past modern era. So I'm not Rabindranath Tagore, who is the one who actually was the national anthem and the first non-white to receive the Nobel Prize, if I'm not mistaken. He was actually Bengali. So Bengal has been at the forefront. I'm not surprised that they have an atheist society, and that to a flourishing one. And
I think it's in Andhra Pradesh.
It's in Andhra Pradesh?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's in Andhra Pradesh. Okay, Andhra Pradesh is a nearby state. I'm surprised. That's interesting. Okay, it's in Andhra Pradesh. Then it's different. I mean, it's a neighboring state. It's also a South Indian state. But I do films in Telugu now, which is the mother tongue of Andhra Pradesh. So I'll have a look there. If you could tell me what city, or I'll look it up online.
I'll send you links and so forth.
Okay, yeah. I'll definitely get in touch with them. But at the same time, it's like one thing is true. I don't know if Indians will ever, even Dalits, who ironically, it's like the religion makes them inferior people. Many Dalits are, of course, religious to their own levels on different levels. So it's like the communist movement, which has promoted a lot of atheist ideas, which has been unsuccessful because they've taken up a lot of economic issues. So it's only if we take up the atheism with the anti-caste movement and with the anti-capitalist movement and the anti-patriarchal movement that we can actually mobilize all of us together, or else it will be kind of incomplete, which is a lot of communists who have, and the communism in India is a social democratic kind of movement, has not been as successful in the 21st century as, like, obviously Hindutva and the BJP.
Are there any other questions? I'm looking around.
All right. Well, if you do have any questions, we can get that from you in the chat. But thanks for running the question and answer session, Jake, and for being our Zoom technician. You really overcame some hurdles this time. So thank you so much. And you were a terrific co-host tonight. And I want to take this opportunity to once again thank our speaker and special guest, Chetan Kumar Ahimsa. And it was a wonderful presentation. I'm just so proud to call you a friend now. And I hope to meet you in person someday soon.
I would love to meet you all. And I want to show you something. I want to, just 1 second. This is what I think, I don't know if you've seen Peria, but this is what he looked like.
It's fabulous.
This is what he looks like. He was, he always walked around with a cane, and this is what we keep in our in the main room in our house.
That's so great. My favorite Perrier story is when he was walking in a main city and he saw a statue devoted to a god, and he took off his sandal and hit it and said, "There is no God, there is no God, there is no God at all."
Yeah, he was, and like I remember, and he had the amazing wit that when like some people they threw the sandal at him, he was like he said he stopped it, and then he started saying more atheist-minded stuff, and then the guy threw the other sandal, and then he went and picked up, like, why did you do this? Like, what am I gonna do with one sandal? I need them both, so I can at least like use them. So he picked them both up, and he goes, so that's a very like. That's a very patriotic kind of thing that he would do. He was extremely witty and charming. And
we can't thank you enough for getting up at 5 a.m. this morning to join us. You are amazing. Well, we are so appreciative of the time you gave us, the work you do, and the education you provided. We at the Freethought Society very much enjoy providing Zoom presentations, and there's more to come. The Freethought Society next event will take place on Saturday, April 30th, 2022. We are hosting author and podcaster Seth Andrews at 11:45 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, 2:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So please see the description of the April event at the Freethought Society meetup page and or the Freethought Society website. Now, Jake is going to tell you about the next American Ethical Union event.
Thank you, Margaret. The next American Ethical Union event is happening on Sunday, March 13th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. One of our societies, the Riverdale Yonkers Society for Ethical Culture, is hosting an event titled Hate Crimes, Violence Against Asian Americans, and Policing with special guest Kai Zhang. If you're interested in attending, please check out our website to learn more, and we really hope to see you there.
I just want to say one thing. I really wish you guys definitely visit India, and there's so much to experience, to learn, love, and when you do visit, please drop me an email. I'll come and see you wherever you guys are, and we will definitely see how we could go through this. I don't know. See, my parents want me to come to America for a little bit, but if I leave the country, they might not let me back in.
Right.
Really?
So there's some threats here and there. So I'm not going anywhere. I don't know if they're gonna throw me out physically, but if I go, I don't know if they'll let me in. So that's why I don't know if I'll come to America, but please do come to India, and it's an extraordinary place.
Well, for those who would like to stay to socialize, we'll take a 5 to 10 minute break, and you can come back and meet us here. If you're leaving the room to refresh, please turn up the volume of your device to enjoy the break music. It's provided by Abraham Steve Mackey, and he is going to be singing John Lennon's Imagine, and this is dedicated to you, Chetan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no country. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. No religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. Wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. Brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you join us, and the world will live as one.
Thanks again, Margaret. And I'm going to head out. Jake and Hugh, thanks a lot again. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chetan. Thanks for sticking around.
Thanks a lot. Bye, Christine. Bye, Hans.